And even more than that, they really knew which, problems in the community could be identified.
Oh, hi! It's Zones 24 and 32. We're so happy that you're here.
Welcome!
I'm Abby McNear. I'm the Director of Grants at the Rotary Foundation.
And I'm Cecelia Walter, Regional Grants Officer.
We're so happy you're here. We understand that you wanted to learn a little bit more about how the Rotary Grants staff can help people with their global grant applications. We'd be happy to talk more about that.
Absolutely.
Given how many of you there are, I think we'd be more comfortable down the hall in the collab. Why don't we head down there?
Let's do it.
Oh,
I came to tell you about the most amazing application.
that's great, Mary. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Mary Hahn, Regional Grants Officer who works with a large part of your zone. Mary, I would love to hear more about it, but while Zones 24 and 32 are here, I think why don't we talk later about it?
Good.
Okay,
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you.
Hey, Steve, I just got the best application. I can tell you that, the Rotarians worked so closely with the community in, developing the project. It was amazing.
That's great. I just got one too with impeccable sustainability.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, Regional Grants Officers Steve Sundstrom and Susan Dockstader.
Hi.
Zones 24 and 32 are here for a visit to talk about how the grant staff can help with
Hello,
global
welcome
grant
to Rotary.
applications. All right, I want to hear more about these later.
Oh,
Come on down.
Yeah.
All right, so Cecelia, why don't we talk a little bit about what the grant staff can do for Rotarians when they go to apply for a global grant. And I think I want to start by talking a little bit about how the grant staff is structured, because a lot of people don't realize this is one of your biggest member benefits when you join Rotary. You have an opportunity as a regular person to do development work abroad. And even better, you have all the help you could possibly need to be able to do that work and do it well, using proven development practices, having people support you, give you advice throughout the entire project, and even obtain funding for what you're going to do. So I think that the Rotary Grants staff is one of your biggest benefits as a Rotarian, and something that a lot of people don't realize that they have access to. So the staff is big. There are 39 of us who work with Rotary Grants. 27 regional grants officers all have their own territory. You've met a few of them, obviously, Cecelia, and some others who we met in the hall. Everyone has their own territory, and they develop a lot of regional expertise, and indeed come into these roles oftentimes with pretty strong ties to the countries with which they're working and multiple language skills. I believe that you speak more than just English, don't you, Cecelia?
I do, Abby. I also speak Japanese.
Yes.
A little fun fact.
Yes, and this is typical of our grant officers. Cecilia's lived in Japan before, so a number of the districts in her territory are located in Japan. The staff, we're in a very good position because the Rotary Foundation is one of the largest international foundations in the Chicago area. So we're really able to hire the cream of the crop, if you will, to work with the grant programs. So the grant officers have either lived abroad, were born abroad. We have a lot of returned Peace Corps volunteers on staff. The grant officers typically hold master's degrees or higher, usually related to development or other fields that are helpful when people sit down to do a grant application, being able to tap into that expertise. So we have our team of grant officers. We have a whole payment team of 5 people, again, with great linguistic skills who work to get those payments out effectively and quickly so that people have the money they need when it comes time to do a grant. We have a number of other people supporting the teams. The grant officers are arranged into 4 regional teams with each headed by a manager. So again, they have a lot of regional expertise. And then we also have our area of focus managers who we're going to talk about a little bit more in a little bit from now. But these are professionals within each of these fields, within the areas of focus. So for example, we have John Walland, who's our manager for disease prevention and treatment and maternal and child health. John has a pretty strong background in public health. It's wonderful we're able to tap him for questions with projects related to that, which is really helpful knowing you're getting that kind of quality advice. So that's a little bit about how we're structured. I think another thing that could be helpful to know is obviously we review grant applications, and what do we do when we review a grant application? What are we looking for when one of these comes in? Of course, we're going through to make sure that the application has met all of the administrative rules that are out there. For example, if any of you in the audience have ever done a global grant, you know that the international sponsor has to contribute 30% of the funding. Well, the grant officers obviously are knowledgeable of these rules and look for that kind of thing. But even more than that, when we take a look at the application, we're looking to see, have you thought about everything you need to think about for this project to be successful? I think the biggest thing is, I'm continually impressed by the Rotarians I work with and the drive that they bring to these projects, the passion that is going into them. There's a significant investment of time, energy, money that's going into each of these grants, and
which we sincerely appreciate, since we know you all are volunteers taking your own time to do all of this, which is awesome.
Exactly, and we really want to see people succeed in what they're doing. So we're looking for some of those little things of like, oh, when someone does a project like this, something that it's easy to forget about but can make a big difference in how the project turns out is, X. I don't know, Cecelia, if you want to talk a little bit more about what you look for.
Of course. I would say when an application hits my desk, the first thing I do is I read it in full. And usually, as Abby said, that's where the passion really shines, is in the answers. You can tell that you're all dedicated to the area you're working in and the project you want to implement. But I, for example, look immediately for area of focus fit, because we have 6 of them, and we just try to make sure that it's aligned with one of them at least. And I also look for the sustainability component as part of the grant. And now, as of July 1st of last year, the community assessment portion as well, to see if either there's information uploaded to the grant or if it's woven into the application's narrative, which happens a lot. So I kind of do those checks of the major kind of grant components as I begin.
And then I will typically write back to the grant sponsors once we have an idea of what it is that they're proposing to do for a project. That's typically when we have just a few other questions, which again are really devoted to trying to ensure that the sponsors have thought about everything that they need to have that project be successful. So I think that as a DISC, if we have a listing on the website as to which grant officers work with which districts, and just knowing that that publication exists and that there is a link to that on the website, I think can really help you as a DISC round out your network, that you can tell people who are thinking about grants or even just want to float an idea to see, would this be eligible for grant funding or what do I do with it? You can look and see exactly who to put them in touch with. So along those lines, Cecelia, obviously reviewing applications isn't the only thing that you do for your job. Do you want to talk a little bit about what else you do?
Yes, I do. So obviously, as Abby mentioned, I review global grant applications, but I have many other parts of my job and many other things that I enjoy about working with Rotarians. And one of the things that I enjoy doing is performing preliminary reviews of applications, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I also can put sponsors in touch with local members of the cadre of technical advisors who are Rotarians who have expertise maybe in a certain field, such as doctors, architects, engineers, and the like. So maybe as you're working on drafting your application, you just want some local input, I can help arrange that. I can also send people global grant and district grant related materials, such as the area focus policy statements, the terms and conditions, those kinds of required documentation that you can look over before you start your grant. And I can also show you where on the website to go to find that information, because it is all available online. I can also answer basic questions. Let's say you don't know how to find the grant center, or you are just wanting to throw an idea out there and you want to bounce it back and forth with me in terms of eligibility. I also can talk to you about that. And finally, really, I can just talk with you about anything grant related. My door is always open. So
That's great. So you mentioned pre-reviews, and this is something we've been encouraging people to do. So do you want to tell me a little bit more about what is a pre-review and how can it be helpful?
yes, great question. So a preliminary review is a review of a global grant or district grant application, which you want to kind of have me look over and receive feedback and commentary on before you go through the whole application process. And because that process can take some time, I think providing that feedback up front is really helpful, especially if there's a grant which may not align with our areas of focus, or maybe just would not be eligible as a global grant. It's good to know that up front so that, as I mentioned, you don't go through the whole process. So it's something I provide and other grants officers provide to help give you as much advice as possible before you submit your global grant application online in the Grant Center.
So this past year, we've been doing more and more pre-reviews. In your opinion, has that helped with the application process once people actually go to formally apply?
Oh, absolutely. I think it speeds up the application online process very significantly. For example, I had a grant taking place here in the Chicago area actually, in which they approached me months before submitting the formal application, and they just wanted to throw the idea out there, get my advice. And so after a course of a couple weeks of looping in the area focus manager that they needed to work with for that project, coming up with some questions that really helped them further describe their objectives and the sustainability of the project, what they ended up doing was working from a very rough draft of a grant to something that was 100% eligible. And I really enjoyed being able to work with them and have the opportunity to develop it into something that I know will have a huge impact here in Chicago. So that's just one way that it's really helped already.
That's great. What about with scholarships? Do you think a pre-review is a good idea for a scholarship application?
Oh, absolutely. That
was a loaded question.
I highly recommend getting any global grant scholars that your districts have kind of fielded candidates for and then said, yes, this is the one we want to apply for a global grant scholarship for. Getting those people vetted preliminarily first, just so that in the event they may not be a fit for a global grant scholarship program, they can seek alternate funding or work in other ways to make sure they receive the funds necessary to go study. Or in the event that they are eligible, it at least lets them be able to network with their university and confirm that they'll be able to attend their program and start making those arrangements. So yes, please request global grant scholarship preliminary review request. Yeah.
So we mentioned a little while ago area of focus managers, because I think a lot of people don't really realize that the foundation employs 5 experts in the areas of focus. So do you ever work with them, Cecelia?
All of the time, Abby, let me tell you. So I would say that for almost all global grant applications that I receive, I do loop in the area focus manager at some point because I myself may not be an expert in a particular field, so therefore I consult the expert. And what we do is we end up reviewing the grant together, and maybe they'll provide some feedback or some questions that I can then share with the sponsors with the end goal of strengthening the project. And the great thing is, all 5 are available for direct consultation if anyone in your districts are interested in receiving kind of coaching advice on how to do a global grant application within an area of focus, or just want a quick conference call to do an eligibility check of a project. They are more than willing to talk directly with people as well. So I use them, and I encourage you all to use them too.
That sounds great. So you mentioned that last July we implemented a new requirement for global grants, and that is that you have to show the results of your community assessment in the application. I've heard back from some Rotarians that they think this is a pretty big, bad, scary requirement. What is your experience?
My experience is it is nothing to be afraid of. Have no fear. Well, all I can say is that, yes, it is a new requirement. It is a bit of a change and a shift over from what it used to be like even more than a year ago. But really, it is an essential part of project design, and it's key in ensuring the success of the global grant project you want to carry out. And it also helps you form a direct relationship with the benefiting community that you'll be working in. So all in all, I wouldn't be afraid. I would use it as an opportunity to really grow partnerships and relationships in the community you want to work in. So those are just my thoughts on that. Yeah.
Do we have anything that could help people if they've never done a community assessment before?
Oh yes, we absolutely do. On the Rotary website, and as I mentioned, I'm happy to send resources along if necessary to anyone who is interested. We have what's called the Community Assessment Tools PDF guide, and it's about a 10 to 12 page document that goes over how to do a community assessment, sample questions. It really goes in depth and is an excellent resource. So that is one. We also have the, if you are completing a community assessment and you have questions about, or you want to know what types of questions we'll be asking or looking for, we have the community assessment results form, which is what you can fill in and upload to the application once you've completed your community assessment. So that's 2 things off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I think one other thing we're really excited about that we released this summer are new grant management training seminar materials. And these are pretty comprehensive. They're online in the Learning Center on the website. They feature more videos of Cecelia and me if you just can't get enough. And they go over a lot of these key components in global grants, such as community assessments, and those are pretty helpful. Thank you, Cecelia. So I think to conclude, we just really want to encourage you as you're building your network as a DISC and you're thinking in terms of who do I refer people to, who can they work with when they go out to do a project. Please, please, please don't forget us. We're here, we're more than happy to help. It's a real joy and pleasure to work with Rotarians as they go about their service efforts. Again, our names and the territories that we work with are all listed on the RI website. If you Google Rotary Grant Staff, you'll get a listing that will pop up. And otherwise, Cecelia and I are always happy to help you or get you pointed in the right direction. So Zones 24 and 32 DISCs, thank you so much for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your workshop. Wish we were there in person. Bye.
Bye.